it takes sustained work behind the scenes, grassroots level, building everything at this club towards making a success in Europe.
We win domestically and get into Europe anyway, so why would we bother?
We are wanting Celtic to move forward. Martin O'Neill isn't the manager to do that.
We've got McKenna at Ipswich.
Yeah.
He's been linked as a sort of up-and-coming young manager.
Ticks that box for Dermot as well.
Yep.
Yeah, he does.
Big Irish tick on that one, yeah.
What I want and what I think's best for Celtic are two different things here.
Why have Celtic fallen so far in Europe, and where is our next manager? That's this week on 20 Minute Tims. I'm joined by Martin Melly.
Yes.
And Stephen.
How's it going?
Not bad. I was pretty impressed with Celtic again at the weekend on domestic duty, but we're not really here to talk about that, are we, Stephen? We're here to talk about what the bloody hell has happened over the course of... When was Bayern Munich? 9 months ago.
20 years. Why don't we just wind it the whole way back?
What has happened to Celtic over the course of the last 9 or so months in Europe? Because you and I, Patreon, we watched the MIDTJYLLAND game and we reacted to it for a Patreon podcast afterwards, and none of us were shocked.
No,
the football world wasn't shocked. It's pretty much come to be expected.
It's sort of miserable resignation, really, after the game, more than anything else, more than any kind of shock. And you have to wonder why it has come to this. And there was an awful lot of, you can't be expected to beat MIDTJYLLAND as if there's some sort of like unconquerable European giant. This is how far we've fallen in indeed just a few months. And we have become accustomed to those annual European wake-up calls, those sort of reality checks. But we got the message with Kairat. You're just taking the piss now. we had Kairat, then we had Braga, and now we've had FC MIDTJYLLAND all in quick succession. We understand we're not very good in Europe. Stop giving us the reality checks now.
We're already dead.
Yeah, yes. Stop. We're already dead. So it was. You're right, entirely unexpected. But the days following that, it became a little bit sort of, I don't know, a bit sad really to think of how far Celtic have fallen out. The ideal circumstances haven't befallen or haven't fallen for us this season. But you're left wondering why it's come to this. I heard a podcast just as we were coming to record. I heard a podcast with Graham Spears and Ewan Murray. Listened to that for my sins, and they were talking about how there's this sort of odd, as I said, resignation to, but Celtic can't be expected to compete with FC MIDTJYLLAND, but you can't have it both ways here. It can't be, we're one of the best run clubs in Britain and we've got everything right, just going by the official communication from the club. We do everything right. There's nothing wrong with our structure, nothing wrong with our recruitment. But at the same time, we're getting our arses handed to us by a club a fraction the size with a fraction of the budget. So why is this?
It's poor, isn't it? It's, like Stephen said, after the game, it didn't even take that long for me to sort of write it off and go, 'cause I knew that was coming. Yeah. We're not in that position where we can be competing with these teams. But then I had to stop myself and go, why not?
Yeah.
That was a 15,000 seater stadium or something like that. We've got 4 times that, and it's kind of in a...
I think they had 1/3 of our wage budget or something, 1/4 of our turnover, 1/4 of our stadium. It's...
Aye, and yet they went out and trounced us. Hibs gave them a game earlier on in the season. It was almost a year to the day since we beat Leipzig in the Champions League last season, and you're just looking at it going, how has this happened in such a short space of time? But looking at Celtic over the week, of kind of everybody around Celtic's got to do their stuff, haven't they? We've got to beat Rangers so we can laud that up. They get to do their referee thing. Then we've gone into Europe and we've got absolutely pummeled, and we get to do our, that's another team we should be like, and why are we not like this? Why are we not forward thinking? Then we get over it after a day or two and go back to domestic duties, and we go out and absolutely demolish a domestic team and go, that was nice, that's how it should be. And you're just wondering, why can't we have it all? Because we seem to have, we're told the structure's there, the strategy's there, everything's in place for us, the money's definitely there, the stadium's there. Why can't Celtic have it all? And it's just through choice we don't have this.
Well, it's through choice because every year we come up against, there seems to be the new up-and-coming club.
Yeah.
But these, when it first started, when the world of data and analytics and all that first started creeping into football, it was like novel and it was new and it was things that everyone couldn't get their hands on now. But if you look at the Bodo Glimts or the MIDTJYLLAND, these are 2 analytics-based teams. A lot of clubs do this now. There's one of these every year. It's every single season there's the new club that comes along that we should be like. We get beat by Hearts. Surprise, surprise. They're heavily invested in data and analytics and all this sort of thing. So it is a choice because it's nothing Celtic can't get involved in. This isn't alchemy. It's not new, mysterious technology. The people are out there. They can be recruited. The technology exists. You can bring it into the club. It's just, to me now, it's just a choice, and it's a choice from a club who seem so fat and lazy, Stephen.
Yeah. Aye.
From winning domestically, from 10 years of benchmarking themselves against an absolutely abysmal Rangers team, have made everyone that runs this club thinking that everything they touch turns to gold. We go into Europe, we get an absolute embarrassment from some up-and-coming new upstart club with an upstart coach who's the next big thing, with players that we're going to see playing for Arsenal and Liverpool and Man City in 3 or 4 years' time, and we wonder, oh, where did they get these guys?
Yeah.
They didn't grow them in a lab. They just
Yeah.
they just opened their laptops, scouted them, paid money for them, played them in their team, and sold. It's not.
Yeah.
I suppose what I'm trying to communicate is, it is a choice, as Melly says. It's not difficult. It's not magic. It's not alchemy. It's just something that Celtic are choosing to ignore.
Yeah, and it was a timely reminder, I think, because there's been a lot of, for understandable reasons, there's been a lot of a feel-good factor around the club just the last month or so. But, well, not even that, a couple of weeks, just because of the Martin O'Neill factor and actually going out and comfortably winning domestic games, which is something we've kind of routinely failed to do basically all season. So there has been a feel-good factor, and that's understandable. Not seeking to take that away, that's in the bank.
Makes a change.
Yeah. But this European game has been a timely reminder of why there has been so much unrest with the supporters, and particularly when it comes to the running of the club. This has never been about, oh, you can't handle it because you're no top of the league, and the first sign of trouble you're all chucking the toys at the pram. It's because it's fairly obvious from anyone who's paying attention that the right decisions are not being made at the club to forward Celtic in Europe. That was always the problem. As far as I can see it, as an observer, as far as I can see, the main problem is we've gone from, and again, we mention it all the time, but here it comes again, we went from running Bayern Munich pretty close, although came off the worst team, the better team went through eventually, right? But we ran them close, and we were all really proud of that performance and optimistic for the future, to falling through the floor in a matter of months. That's the questions being asked of this board. Those are the literal questions being posed to them in the letter that was signed by tens of thousands of people, or via club representatives, supporter representatives rather. It's always been about that, and now we have fairly clear evidence that we're not on the same planet of being run like these clubs are, because there's loads of examples of it. Karabag are getting points in the Champions League, and the next cab off that rank, if we're not careful, it might not be this season, and it doesn't look like it's going to be, but the next cab off that rank could be Hearts, and they are, based on who Tony Bloom is and what he plans to do with the club, and there's a track record there with other clubs, he's coming to eat Celtic's lunch, and as far as I can tell, Celtic aren't doing anything about it. They're just sitting back and saying, hey, we run brilliantly, we've collected all these trophies, what are you moaning at us for? The structure's there, it's all that Brendan Rodgers' fault, and we finally get rid of him. That's the plan, as far as I can tell. And we had another example of it against Midtjylland, where Celtic on the night couldn't even compete with them, couldn't get near them. It was an absolute rout. It could have been as many goals as they wanted in the first half, and then they just sort of took the foot off the gas. And this is a team that hasn't been assembled for tens and tens of millions. This wasn't a PSG or a Man City where, yes, you do go in thinking, right, it's kind of damage control here, but this was a team made of mostly 19 to 23-year-olds, all kind of on the way up in their careers. The oldest sub they brought on, Midtjylland, was a 26-year-old Brazilian that they signed this summer and has already scored 6 goals for them this season. So all guys who come in, hit the ground running and contribute straight away. Meanwhile, we're still faffing about with all this project, stick them in the B team, stick them out on loan, stuff that we've been doing for years. So this, for me, illustrates perfectly the problems with the club. It's never about throwing the toys out of the pram because we've not started the season brilliantly. It's because we can see we are no longer a force in Europe like we could have been. That was the potential going into this season. We could have been so much more and chose not to be. And
that is, again, the problem. We don't like harping back to it, but the Bayern Munich game and last season's Champions League, we always felt that this has to be the start of something, because too many times at Celtic we have had a decent campaign and then that's been it. And again, we're in that, aren't we? Because that's it. We're going to need to tear this one up and start again next season. Maybe bring in a manager and start something afresh. Whereas these clubs, like we've seen on, was it Wednesday night? Club Brugge, we played them last year. We're disappointed to get a 1-1 draw with them. A year later, they're drawn 3 each with Barcelona and competing, and could have and maybe should have beat them. whereas we are just floundering in the Europa League. And
It's funny, isn't it? Because we always said, like, oh, maybe the Europa League's our level, and then you get in, then you get into the Europa League, and then we're like, oh well,
Proved us wrong.
I know the Europa League's not our level after all.
but this is where we've came to be. We've had this resignation that this is Celtic now, but it's not. We're worse than we want to be, because you always think once we competed well in the Champions League. See, if we just fell down, we'd be all right there. But the reason we fell down is because we fell off so much, and then we've not got the quality to even compete in there. And looking across this, that it's that again, the resignation that Midtjylland, they'll go out and beat us handedly. And why do we have to think that that's going to happen? Because when we look out to the statements and what's come out of Celtic, all they're interested in is, for the last 20 years, we've qualified for Europe. Doesn't say what competition. That's all they're interested in, is qualifying for Europe. So this is the sum of their ambition, for Celtic to be in Europe, not to compete in Europe, for Celtic to be in Europe.
I mean, it was. You could go back to the likes of Copenhagen, but Bodo Glimt's a good example, because we're probably going to talk about their manager a wee bit later in the podcast when we discuss, Celtic's managerial options. But when did Bodo Glimt beat us? When were they the next big thing? Ange's first season?
Ange's first season.
So what's that, 4 years ago now?
Oh, nearly 5.
Nearly 5 years ago. So when they put us out nearly 5 years ago, that should have been like a warning signal to our board to say, like, well, this is the way that football clubs are going. And it just seems like it was completely ignored. And we've ignored so many warnings. There's been so many times. This is even the likes of, it's, you don't want to go back to the likes of Ferencváros and Prague and all that, because those were kind of different. I suppose what I'm trying to say is, it seems to be the same model of club that beats every. It seems to be the new up and coming, analytics led. I don't want to repeat myself, but it seems to be that model of club that we run into and fall down against, and we're left scratching our heads like, how did this happen?
Yeah, and Stephen raises a good point that it's going to bite us soon domestically as well, because Hearts, like it or lump it, are competing right now, and they're barely into this process, aren't they? Like, they might next season get into Europe and then struggle with the squad. But if it does continue on the trajectory that every other club that Tony Bloom has invested in, then Hearts will be competing at one point. And Celtic are, again, flat track bullies, aren't they? We can beat teams domestically, but what happens when those you're bullying stand up to you one day? And that's what's going to happen here with Hearts. We're seeing it all over Europe. We're seeing it with different teams. We're seeing, even in the English Premier League, teams are using every single bit of data, information they can to try and get the next manager, the next players, the next analysis in, long throws, penalties, corners, throw-in coaches. They're trying everything. What are we doing? Gavin Strachan.
I mean, well, I suppose Celtic would argue that we're doing these things because that's what they say, isn't it? The structure's there, the structure's in place. But you are left wondering a little bit, well, how does our structure compare to these other
Where's the evidence
clubs?
for that?
Yeah, where's the evidence for it? And if the goal is Stephen just getting into Europe, and as Melly said, the board pointed out, 19 out of the last 20 years we've got into Europe, you think to yourself, well, but to what end? Just to collect the check and then get so, routinely humbled?
So you've hit the nail on the head there. You've perfectly identified the completely two warring schools of thought at play here. So there are these clubs who seek to maximise, and that's the key word, isn't it? Celtic don't do that. They, as you've already detailed, Melly, they consider, again, going by official club communication, they consider participation in Europe as a big tick. That's them. They've met their objectives.
They think analytics are sad.
Yeah, woke.
It's near impossible for us not to get into Europe, isn't it?
Of course, yes. So that was the discussion that came about through the minutes of the meeting that the club held during the very lows of the Brendan Rodgers war that was going on with the board. The minutes that came out of the club meeting with fan representatives was that they said that, what was it, qualifying for group stages 19 out of 20 years.
Yes.
It was put to them that that's very difficult not to do because of the structure of Scottish football. It's basically, it's Celtic plus. Celtic are the main club that have got basically a free run at Europe every year. And they rejected the premise entirely. They didn't want to know about that because they just said, well, it's European participation. So there's the clubs here that we're looking at, like MIDTJYLLAND. We don't have to go through the list of names again, but we all know who they are by now, that seek to maximise. They have a ceiling as well. They're not going to win the Champions League, right? But what they do is they put every ounce of resource, money, and basically intelligence into finding the best way to maximise their potential
So
in
did Bodo
European
not get to-
competitions.
Bodo, did he not get to the semi-final of the Europa League
I
last
think
year?
that
It
was
was
that.
the
Yeah.
Conference League, I
Was
think.
The
that the
semi-final of the Conference. I'd take that.
Oh no,
Yeah.
was it Tottenham that beat them? It might be
Ah,
Europa.
yeah.
I think it was
Yeah,
the
it was,
Europa
it was Europa. That's
Never
right.
correct me again.
I stand corrected.
So on one hand, we have those clubs who seek to, as I say, maximise every available ounce of their potential to make the most of the club that they can and hope to be. On the other hand, we've got clubs like Celtic who just collect loads and loads of money and call it running a club well. And that, again, one of the glaring inconsistencies with Dermot Desmond's statement, absolutely flaming Brendan Rodgers a few weeks ago, was he once again reiterated this sort of odd policy that they have to say publicly that they invest every pound back into the club and the playing squad and all that. Somehow they've accidentally accumulated £77 million, despite the fact they invest all of that back in. So you've got, as I said, just to finally kind of round this out, clubs who look to maximise their potential and clubs who think they've done enough. And that's Celtic are very much on this side of things. It's just collecting money, be it through a captive audience of season ticket holders who are going to buy it regardless. We proved that during COVID. We all paid for our season tickets, right? That money is basically guaranteed. They've got some commercial deals, and that's it. It's jobs are good, and we don't need to worry about Europe because we're in there every year.
So do you think maybe Celtic sort of take the approach that, because there's nothing, as I keep reiterating, there's nothing stopping Celtic doing this anymore. I would have accepted that argument 10 years ago, but you're not going to convince me that the way that Bodo find these players or the way that MIDTJYLLAND find these players, that it's more difficult to convince a Brazilian or a Portuguese footballer, a Dutch footballer or an Italian footballer to go to MIDTJYLLAND than it is to go to Glasgow and play for Celtic. I flat out did. I know Celtic say, well, it's difficult to get players to come to this league. How are they going to the Norwegian league? Why are they going to the Danish league? I flat out just reject the premise of that. It's all the money's there. Every Celtic have the money there to then put in place all these data and analytics and all the other things you need to be a successful football club, like the ones that regularly put us out of Europe. So do you think it is just a case of, well, we don't need that because we win domestically and get into Europe anyway, so why would we bother? Why would we at all employ another 20 people, another 10 more scouts, another 15 more coaches, whatever it takes? Why would we put that investment into the business when we're just making money hand over fist every single season anyway, swiping all the competition domestically out our way, and you know what, maybe 1 in 10, 15, 20 seasons will do all right in Europe, but that's enough.
That's exactly it. Celtic Park is full of guys telling other guys what a great job they're doing, you as well, and that's how they run it, because while they say, look at us, we've accumulated all this money, look at the money you have pissed away. You've had a free run at the Champions League for 15 years basically. You've won the league all bar once pretty much, and what do you need to do? The odd qualifier here or there where every single time I think every time they've been seeded. So Celtic should be the better team going into those games. They're not, and like you say, MIDTJYLLAND, Bodo Glimt, whoever it is, are you telling me that they're offering better wages? Are you telling me that they've got a better stadium, all this stuff? It's not happening, and it's not as if we're looking at them and going, do you know what, but that guy cost £50 million and they sold him for 40 and he cost 20. It's nothing like that. It's less than the money we are paying out for duds like Balaquisha. So it's all
is that already, is it? Is it stamp out already, is it?
It's definitely out if Yang's playing ahead of you, isn't
Oh,
it?
yeah.
But these players are out there. Like Matt O'Reilly sums that up for me. When Celtic signed him, I remember doing the scouting pod with him, and the guy that was doing it with us, who now works in football, said, this guy is a freak. If I look at all his data here, he is at the top percentile for everything here. He said
him to go
said
for
this
a,
at the time.
yeah.
He said he'll go for a record transfer fee for Celtic, and he pretty much did. The players are out there. Matt O'Reilly didn't cost us 11 million, but these guys are out there. It's about how you go and find them, and Celtic have got no interest in doing that because Posh McKinley's a scout.
I think that,
Millie's naming names on the podcast here. Everyone's catching.
I think a big
Poor
problem.
Tosh.
I think a major problem for the board is that, and I bet they wish this wasn't happening, but with more and more access to the kind of global football scene, more people, it's no the 90s anymore. Where
There's blogs, there's podcasts.
So
YouTube, everything about all this stuff.
More and more people are waking up to the kind of European football landscape, and I don't think that Celtic either want that to happen, or I just don't think they value the customer, as they would probably term it, the supporter, as I would probably term it, the customer experience, because there's a hunger for this. There's a desire to just do something in Europe. We were all buzzing after that Bayern Munich game. Yeah. Yes, it was defeat, but
they sell it to you though. They don't. Even Martin O'Neill's like this. Not criticism of Martin O'Neill. He's bang on when he says European football. This is where Celtic need to be. This is what I mean. That it's another sort of sleight of hand by the club. The club sell you this European dream every year.
Yeah.
They play the Champions League theme at the end. The end of the last game. We're going into the Champions League next year. Every player that's signed these Champions League nights, you're looking forward to these famous European nights under the lights, and then Martin O'Neill and the manager. This is where Celtic need to be, and then it's like a boxing match, isn't it? I'm not. Despite my physique, I'm not really into boxing,
right?
That much.
It's always boxing.
Yeah. I know it's always, but this is a good one, right? And the reason, for those who don't know, I regularly make boxing analogies on the podcast I've never watched a boxing match in my life, but now you're about to find out why I've never watched a boxing match, because this is a great comparison.
Right.
The reason I don't watch boxing is because there's a lot of hype before the fight, and then a boxing match occurs, and then you speak to people the next day and they'll go, "It's crap, wasn't it?"
Right.
And boxing is sold on the hype, but the actual event itself very rarely lives up to the hype. That's what Celtic are doing with the Champions League. They're selling you the Champions League hype. They're selling you the Europa League hype without any notion of really backing it up in any meaningful way.
And this is what I mean about how they don't value the actual experience of it, because they think that's it. It's just participation. We get to hear that theme tune and that's us. We're happy with it. But there are more and more people, as I say, waking up to the fact that these clubs can have that and Celtic can't. And for some reason, I know the counter to that, just to make the opposite point, the counter to that, if the board were hearing this conversation, they could
Give
say,
them an ask.
they could easily say, but we win everything domestically, and that's, I can't argue with that. That's take that as read. However, all we want is a taste of just that other thing, and it's not. The problem here is that it's not unreasonable. That's perfectly within Celtic's grasp. They just don't bother. They just don't try. And again, another counter to that, as was contained in Dermot Desmond's pretty outrageous statement, was, we've broken records with record outlays and all that. But again, you think that's enough? We've spent £11 million on Arne Engels, so that means we're going to win the Europa League. It's just, it doesn't work like that. It takes sustained work behind the scenes, grassroots level, building everything at this club towards making a success in Europe. And nobody's asking to win the Champions League here. It's just, we don't want to feel like we're also-rans every single year. And what's also key to this is a little bit of hope in there that we can actually achieve something and not be going into games against MIDTJYLLAND, who, all due respect, really good team, really well-run club, really good players, but there's no reason Celtic can't be competing with them, and we all thought we're going to lose this.
You're talking about like the sort of the way football's covered now in podcasts and blogs and YouTube channels. There was a time not so long ago, if Celtic could get beaten by MIDTJYLLAND, there would be several newspapers and sports websites and even like these horrible content aggregator, whatever, Twitter accounts, whatever you want to call them. You'll not believe who beat Celtic last week. Shock result. Not a peep. It was a football match that occurred between two teams and the better team won, and not one person outside Glasgow seemed to bat an eyelid at it.
No, and it's again going down the selling the dream route. The dream that Celtic are selling us is kind of, European nights, you'll love it. Come and play at Celtic under these European nights. But then it's it's down to the fans to get those nights. It's not about us. You need to generate the atmosphere to send these players out to go and do it. And it's again what Brendan Rodgers was trying to sell us as well. Pace, power and quality. I've seen a lot of that from MIDTJYLLAND. I've seen an awful lot of powerful guys with a lot of pace in the right positions that could ping balls in.
Technical proficiency, yeah.
If you let them run at them, and you're just watching this going, that's what I want. Oh, last season, Bruges, that's what I want. Every other season, that's what we're after, and we're just not getting it. And like you're saying, Jamie, it's the structure, isn't it? Because what we're asking Celtic to do, we don't expect us to go in and then do all this stuff and Celtic will be into the semi-finals of the Champions League. We will have a ceiling as well. But see, when we're on the floor, looking up at everybody building structures up to the ceiling, and we are going, how are they doing that and continuing to do that? And we are left down here scouting players, and with Arne Engels, we went and paid all this money for him. Yeah, but look at these other clubs. They will make bad signings the odd time because signings don't work out. 9 times out of 10, our signings are bad signings. That's because they're not scouted properly. There's not analysed properly. There's no due diligence. How many players have we signed recently? It's not worked out. And then you look at him, Marian Shved. He's homesick. It didn't work.
Shved.
It didn't
How
work.
did he get in there?
It didn't work out.
No
when he
more
went.
recent examples than him.
I could come up with loads, but he's just one that popped in my head. He went on a stint to Europe previously. Didn't work out. Why? Because he was homesick. What do? Go and dish out a 4 or 5 year deal to the guy, and it's again.
I might press you to give us a more recent example. I mean, you could point to Balikwisha.
I can point to a number of signings. It's not just the homesick thing, but it's all these signings that we make. Arne Engels, we signed him as a replacement for a player. He's nothing like Matt O'Reilly, is he? And it's all these guys like, if we are going to have that outlay for players, surely you'd want to go and do the proper analysis and scouting. So you go, we're going to pay 11 million, which is our record, but there's very little that can go wrong here unless it's something human where it just doesn't work out. But with Celtic, it's just, we can get that guy, get him in, that'll do. And we see it time after time. These signings don't work.
Hello. Do you want a box of cans and Martin O'Neill back? Well, we've got Martin O'Neill back, and here's how to get the cans. Our friends at Beer 52 are offering you a free case of 8 unique beers you won't find anywhere else. Go to www.beer52.com/Tims and just cover the postage to get your free case now. Beer 52 are the UK's #1 beer club. Every month they visit a different place and expertly curate a case of exclusive beers from the region's best breweries. Your free case will include an eclectic selection of beers from the world's best beer countries, including the UK, Germany and the USA.
This can from Buro looks amazing and the beer is even better. The vibrant hop profile ensures it's bursting with flavour, while its rounded palate delivers a smooth finish that will keep you coming back for more. If you don't like dark beer, just choose the light case and don't forget you get a couple of tasty snacks.
You can also learn about all the fantastic breweries, in this case with the award-winning Ferment magazine. Even if, after all that, you're still unsatisfied, you can simply pause or cancel at any time. So that's www.beer52.com/Tims to claim your free case of insanely good beers now. That's beer52.com/Tims. I think there's definitely a question about, what Celtic do and don't do. And the fact of the matter is you never know. It's quite easy to sit here and go, Celtic don't scout. They don't. I'm sure they do. I'm sure because there's people within the club who would no longer want to work there if certain things weren't in position. And I'm sure there's fights to make changes within the club.
Again, but if you go online, you will be able to find Bodo Glimt's strategy and what they want to do. Go and find Celtic.
Well, that's the thing. So off the back of this, the next obvious question is, well, for Celtic to get anywhere, we need a new football manager.
Yeah,
and
would help.
KNUTSEN from Bodo Glimt has been named, and yeah, I mean, I've got thoughts on him, and I've got thoughts on how he's achieved what he's achieved at that particular club, and we'll come to it in a sec. But I think the one thing that keeps ringing in my ear about that particular manager is he worked within a structure that seemed to be working. Everything was geared to make that work, and just dropping a guy in to the mess that we've got and saying, go do that thing you did that doesn't seem to work. And there seems to be a real lack of joined up thinking, because there's almost next to no news, Stephen, on this new manager. Mel, you made a little whimper there.
Yeah, just before you move on to Stephen, sorry, the Bodo Glimt, he was a big part of implementing this. So while we are having a go at Celtic, if they go out and get him, it is hopefully to implement this at Celtic, because we're starting from scratch, basically. He has had a massive hand in doing everything around this club. He's probably the kind of ideal manager for Celtic. We don't get a lot of these guys that want to have a hand in everything in the club anymore, and he was the guy that's come in and had a massive impact on implementing a lot of the things that's went round. So maybe it is, doubt it, but is Celtic getting the guy in and going, he's the best guy to implement this for us long term? I don't know, but it wasn't as if he was dropped into Bodo Glimt's structure and then it's worked for him there. He's played a hand in it.
Well, that would be my issue there, though. Does anyone at Celtic listen to that? Because if he comes in and says, I need this sort of structure around me, what we're dealing with is a bunch of guys who think they've done nothing wrong for the better part of 20 years, and also we're telling this guy,
new guy.
we're telling this guy on day one, see the guy that flamed the previous manager on the way out the door. By the way, that's who you're going to be dealing with. Better no cross him, and also a lot of the transfers involve ringing him up on the golf course and getting him okay transfer fees when he's in Barbados and all that. So that would be my worry there, and assuming that this guy is going to bring with him all these fresh ideas that the club is
because there
interested
needs to be
in.
a willingness, doesn't there, to accept these ideas, and for that to happen there needs to be an acceptance that things aren't going your way. And maybe it's just the case that the club are just too stubborn and too proud to say to fans, you know what, you're right, we need to change things about here and we're going to. I don't know why that would be the case after a massive failure, rather than tell the fans to effectively ram your opinion.
The last guy that tried to bring this in was shooed out very quickly, and I'm not saying Don Mackay was the right guy, but the first thing he came in and said was he mentioned clubs like this and this is what we have to be more like, and then it was whoa, what are you trying to do here?
And by the way, see, on the subject of that, forget things like protests, demonstrations going on outside the ground for a few minutes outside, the not singing for 12 minutes, chucking tennis balls on the pitch. What was at the heart of this was a very reasonable and well thought out communication directly to the club, just asking them questions that they could address at their leisure, and they just haven't. So that's the problem with this. It was asking about things like football and structure and what's the long-term strategy. And even there was one quite recently, it was Real Betis, I think, came out with a lengthy video about how they plan to go about the things and all the recruitment that goes into it and all that. So it's often framed like fans just expecting a little bit of communication and a little bit of guidance on where their club's going from the club is treated as if it's entitlement and all that. Like, know your place. So it's just fans asking for a bit more information that we never get.
I do worry a little bit about the sort of clamour to get Knutsen in from somebody. I mean, he was the favourite for the longest time because, as you pointed out, that's a manager that operates within a very specific structure, and there's no inkling at all that Celtic are willing to adopt. Maybe secretly they are. Maybe they have taken the attitude, look, things need to change, but we're not telling that lot they need to change. So
Desmond has seemed like he's on a bit of a tear recently, so we can only hope that leads to some sort of positivity.
But I'm so worried for Celtic also seeing that as, I'll just go out and get him. You know, the short-term fix. Just plug that guy in. He'll solve.
Have him manage some stuff.
Yeah, he'll solve all our problems. Because I think that's what they tried to do with Brendan Rodgers. I think they thought, do you know what? It is all a bit shonky in there, but if we get a big, fat, expensive sticking plaster called Brendan Rodgers,
100%,
put him in charge of things, that'll sort it all out. And it's kind of what they did with bringing in Martin O'Neill. Now, that's for all intents and purposes, it's worked out. But Martin O'Neill is also sounding a bit like a guy, Melly, who's like, going to tell me what's happening here. You know, I'm kind of looking forward to riding off into the sunset.
Because he's the guy who's always, quite famously during the week, fielding numerous questions about it. Not a single press conference goes past without him being asked about the job.
The interview after the MIDTJYLLAND game? That was painful watching the repeated questions about whether or not he needs a transfer window. I said, what? You could tell Martin was running out of polite ways to answer that question and saying, look, I'm not interested in a transfer window. What are you asking me for? So there's obviously, Martin sounds like a guy that's come to the end of his time at Celtic. He said he's had a wonderful time and all this, and he's done a great job as interim manager. And I think most fans sort of merely have the expectation that come in, 4 games, a reunion tour for Martin O'Neill. He gets to do all these things, and we say thanks very much for saving us. But there are a few smatterings. Journalists, ex-players, fans online as well, but you'll find any opinion you want online, but journalists and ex-footballers as well, particularly like Sir John Hartson, sort of suggesting that Martin should be here for not just until January, not just to the end of the season, but some people want him for the long haul. Personally, I don't see any merit in that argument at all.
No, I can't see any for all the love I have for Martin, and it is an awful lot. Just don't see all this stuff we're talking about. I remember when it was going wrong in the COVID. Well, at the sort of start of it going wrong, it was sort of muted. It was going to be Martin O'Neill and Gordon Strachan come in. What are we doing here? 5 years further down the line, and Martin O'Neill is in charge at Celtic, and it just, if we're talking about is Celtic going into this new age and going along with these new analysts and all that, and then Martin O'Neill's the man to do it, it's not the way. And like, he's 73, he doesn't look like he wants to be out there being that guy, does he? It probably is a bit tedious being in the media every day saying, are you staying, are you going? He's like, I'm in here to do a job for a certain amount of time,
Yeah.
trying to do it. I have got some football to talk about, but you don't want to talk about that. And it's not really fair on him either, being that guy that's always going to be the one that comes in and helps Celtic out when they need it. He's done a brilliant job. He's really, I wasn't sure of it at the start. In fact, I was sure of it. I thought it was a terrible idea at the start, but he's came in, changed things ever so slightly, and just brought a sort of feel-good factor back when we thought it was completely gone. So for him to be there long-term, again, just shows like it wouldn't be the right structure. And who's out there saying it? His pal, Graham Spears, players who've worked under him before. It's not really anybody else out there, is it? It's not if we're wanting Celtic to move forward, Martin O'Neill isn't the manager to do that. He might go on and win Celtic League and do a decent job for a while, but at some point it's going to be, this guy isn't a modern day manager or a modern day coach, and that's where we're wanting Celtic to go. He's came in, done absolutely brilliant, cemented his legacy, made himself even more of a legend. Leave it at that. Don't pull the guy along in Celtic's disaster.
Because you know how things end with Celtic, don't we?
yeah. I agree with all of that. So I won't bother repeating any of it. What I would just
That's good podcasting.
Yeah, yes, indeed. What I would say is that it just leads back into the conversation we've already had tonight about modernising the club and maximising everything possible to make us a European force. Now, if it is a matter of modernisation, personally at this point, I don't see Martin O'Neill as being part of that solution at all. I think he's exactly the right guy for the short term. Again, I responded pretty strongly to it at the time, but it's because I thought, right, this is it. He's going to be in there as the permanent manager after a couple of weeks when we reacted at the time. But as part of the long-term vision of the club, even beyond this season, I don't see Martin O'Neill being a part of that. And it would be my preference to start whatever repairs need done to this club to make us all the things that we mentioned earlier. Start that today, ideally yesterday. And part of that is going to be making the decision as soon as possible. Whereas all the problems are not going to be fixed in a January window, but I'd like to get a manager in ahead of the January window so that there are some decisions that can be made to have an idea of what needs done in that window and we're not kicking the can down the road. That would be my preference. I don't think Martin O'Neill is going to be part of it long term. Quite frankly, it's quite difficult to get any proper, useful information out of Martin O'Neill right now in terms of his press because he jokes a lot and he makes little quips and it's all very charming, but it's not like it's misleading. But it does sort of avoid a lot of questions.
Part of me thinks that's on purpose. Part of me thinks Martin O'Neill is on purpose insofar as he doesn't really want to tell the press anything. He's a bit old school. He doesn't want to talk about who might, because he's unusually cagey about who may and may not be fit for each game. Whereas most managers come out and go, he's injured. They need to ask Martin 2 or 3 times, and he'll say, we'll need to take a look at him. Yeah,
I totally. Yeah, so I think it is deliberate, and I think it's just built up of many, many decades of experience of dealing with the press, something he was never particularly keen on in the first place, right? So I totally get all of that, but I'm kind of reading between the lines, and he's saying a lot of things like it's a young man's game, and I look even older than I am. Do I look like I'm doing well? That's your answer. So he is joking, but a certain point, without being patronising, you have to believe him. He is 73 years old, and when I found out that he'd managed a game in Denmark on the Thursday, then came home and was straight into press on the Friday, I thought that it must take its toll. Again, I'm not being patronising about it. I'm merely looking at the reality of the situation. I don't think he wants it long term. If would be my reading of the situation, I could be completely wrong, but he hasn't said a single word that would suggest that he wants to take it long term. Quite the opposite. In fact, again, he could be being coy about it. It could be just be managing the media in the way that we know he can. But I don't get any impression that he wants this to be a longer term thing. I think he and I would like to look back on this as just a brilliant wee whirlwind we experienced. Look back on this in a year's time and think, remember that time Martin O'Neill managed us for a month and it was brilliant, and then we closed the chapter and started our big cliche and all that, but a new adventure. And I think that my preference would be that starts as soon as possible.
Got into our new sinking ship.
Yeah.
The Celtic way, just all aboard
Steady
for
the
3
ship.
years of sailing, and then it hits the iceberg.
You don't want it to go too long, that if things do go wrong with Celtic in the next season, 2 or 3 seasons, that it's always going to be get Martin in to steady the ship, do you? You just want it to come in, him to steady the ship, go off on his merry way, and then Celtic bring another manager and go off on this new adventure. Whereas if we just keep jumping from manager to manager, and there's always going to be get Martin in for a couple of games,
I don't think that's going to happen. I think this should and will be a one and done. I can understand some people's inclination to say, "Oh, he's done a great job. Give him to the end of the season for talking's sake." Because on the face of it, if he's winning football matches and that's all that's required to do, I'm playing devil's advocate a bit here, but if the question is, he's winning football matches, that's all you need him to do, can this continue to the end of the season? An absolute push. If you... my issue is, I don't know how much longer it can go on, as you say, taking everything into account. Maybe, but I can understand people's inclination to want to sort of reward Martin for his good work by suggesting he could do it. But I personally, I'm just of the opinion that I think there's nothing better than him coming in, proving all of us are wrong, because we all thought this would be a terrible idea, and then sailing off into the sunset.
Imagine we get to the point where at the start of the season our biggest worry was Brendan Rodgers is going at the end of the season, so we're just going to have to answer questions on this to giving Martin O'Neill it to the end of the season. It doesn't seem logical, does it?
Yeah, and on winning football games and potentially winning a trophy if it goes on that long, where there's a cup final on the horizon, right? That doesn't really form any part of why I don't want it to go on. That's why I'm trying to be quite specific about...
People talk about that cup final like it's sooner than it is. It's mid-December.
Yeah,
he's only been here for 2 weeks?
Yes.
And that's another month away.
Exactly. So it's not just around the corner, but it is a very real thing, because what the main thing that Martin O'Neill has achieved is winning a semi-final. So
you're right in what you're saying. People have been saying, give him the cup final.
Naturally, thoughts turn to the cup final, but it's nothing to do with that for me. It really is about, as I said, there's a road that I want to go down with Celtic, and I don't see Martin O'Neill being on it. It's nothing to do with, I don't think he'll win games, or I think we're going to finish 4th in the league, or anything. Nothing like that at all. My inclination would be to start whatever project it is, to, as you call it, the sinking ship. I want to board that as soon as possible. Yeah.
On the new doomed cruise. Just on Martin, I think he's done a really good job, as well as keeping the pressure on Hearts, because Derek McInnes would have looked at Brendan going, and he would have been rubbing his grubby little paws at the prospect of extending that lead. And what are we, 7 points behind now with a game in hand? I strongly suspect that's official breathing down their neck territory, and I think the pressure will be on Hearts and
Rangers fans they'll have loved being told that they get all the decisions this week. They would have loved that after the week they've just had. Derek McInnes tells them that they got all the decisions. They would have got that.
That's when the cracks are starting to appear, and he's thrown Rangers under the bus.
They're still spewing about the trusty things and all that, and they've been told they get all the decisions. Enjoy that.
We don't have time to sit here and go through all the refereeing errors. Who's your ideal captain for this next doomed cruise then? Is it right? And you don't need to name names, because we're not Paul Tidsdale. We don't have a massive phone book with 3 names in it, but we've got
one of them being Dermot Desmond.
One of them being Dermot Desmond.
I've got nowhere near as cool headwear either.
No,
as demonstrated.
What a trilby. Okay. So we've had KNUTSEN, who I've made my thoughts clear on, and he's sort of analytics next big thing. Another thing that worries me a wee bit about him, just briefly, is he has been the next up and coming manager for the best part of 4 or 5 years. Then he was linked to the Brighton job after Potter. He was linked to Ajax. He's been linked to many big jobs. For whatever reason, no one's taken the plunge. I know people will very quick to tell you, well, that's because he's got this set up at Bodo where he gets a share of the transfers. I'm sure Brighton and Ajax could have taken care of that for him if they wanted to. We've got McKenna at Ipswich. He's been linked as a sort of up and coming young manager, more British orientated, knows the British football scene, British football scene.
He ticks that box for Dermot as well.
He does.
Big Irish tick on that one.
And then we've got Wilfred Nancy from the MLS, another sort of exciting young coach out there. His assistant actually worked with Paul Tidsdale at Exeter City as under-18s coach or manager, whatever.
Imagine my shock.
I know. So my eyes kind of glancing over there. Is there any of those guys, Stephen, fit the mould for you? Have you got an idea, maybe not a name, but an idea in your head who you want the next Celtic manager to be?
Of that list, and
Of what ilk would you want him to be
yeah,
of?
of that shockingly short list and the complete lack of any kind of rumours we've had.
Are you worried about that?
Not as such.
I'm a wee bit.
Yeah, I'm slightly concerned that there doesn't seem to be anything in the way of where there are discussions happening with managers. I know Craig Bellamy turned it down, but all he was really asked was if it would be. I think he said it's not on his radar and it won't be on his radar because he's so focused on Wales. So that's really the only thing we've had to go on in any sort of public venue at all in terms of the manager's job. On the names or of the names on the table at the moment, I really like the idea of Kieran McKenna. I think that's, whether that's prohibitively expensive because there were some reports that he's on $6 million a year with Ipswich. He was on an unbelievable wage down there, but whether he just fancies the opportunity, I can hope so. I've always rated Kieran McKenna. There's some chatting. I actually searched back for it in our Discord. I've mentioned Kieran McKenna previously. Nothing to do with the Celtic job because I didn't think that would ever be a possibility because of aforementioned kind of 1, reputation and 2, salary. But I'd mentioned him before because I'd said that if Man United had just appointed him, they'd probably be in a better place than they currently are. If they just appointed him when he was like 35, they'd probably be in a better nick just now. So I've always been aware that he does have a very good reputation. Clearly, he's a young and up and coming coach, so there isn't the sort of proven track record of like trophies won in other countries or anything like that. But
Sick of hearing that.
What does that get you? That gets you Clement and Van Bronckhorst and all that. Those guys had won trophies in other countries. It's a good thing to have, of course, on the CV, but I wouldn't say it's any kind of cast iron
Depends
guarantee.
what country they come from, I suppose, doesn't it? If it's from England, then I'm not too concerned about trophies. But if you're from a smaller nation like say Belgium or Holland and managed there for a while and not won anything, I would probably be more interested.
That's fair. I think that's fair. Of course, it's very, very difficult. Unless you're managing one of a handful of clubs in England, you're very unlikely to win anything. So really, if you remove trophies, what you're looking at is outperforming your resources. And I think to an extent, Kieran McKenna has been able to do that.
Probably too much to start with.
Yeah, getting him promoted. Was it back-to-back promotions with Ipswich? And then again relegated. But I think what's been proven in that league over the last few years is it's almost impossible to stay in it just because the gap between the Championship and the Premier League is enormous these days. But I'm intrigued by that one. I don't know anything about Wilfred Nancy. I haven't followed his career. That's the first I've been aware of that connection with Tisdale, right enough. So, of the very few candidates on the table, my inclination would be, wow, it's the most famous and the most expensive one.
Yeah.
What a brilliant take that is. But yeah, I'm intrigued by McKenna.
The McKenna thing, the wages come up a lot. I just feel like we've had expensive managers in the past. Yeah. We've got the money there, and there's ways and means to get deals done. I'm sure of it. But it's just that I'm a wee bit worried. I'm a wee bit worried about the lack of momentum. There seems to be a lack of momentum behind this. I'm not comparing us and Rangers because they just so happen to be the most recent club that have sacked a manager that have been on my radar. But it seemed very quickly people were being approached. There was a short list, names were out. There was Muscat and Gerrard and all these people, and you think, right, and that kind of seems to be the way it goes when managers get sacked very quickly. Names are in the hat, and we've not had that. Really, forget the names that have already been mentioned that we've discussed, unless there's one that particularly takes your fancy. What sort of kind of manager do you want? Because you've got, as I say, McKenna, the sort of British football-based manager who's maybe in the mould of, say, like an Eddie Howe or whatever. And then you've got the foreign and KNUTSEN. He's not young. He's 57. He's not an young up and comer.
Getting to that Ange sort of stage, isn't he? Where it might be his kind of his gateway to, if he even interested in it at all, his gateway to the Premier League sort of thing. Yeah.
But is there anyone that's sort of archetype would you like?
Again, it's kind of the difficulty we have now with managers, sort of what we've seen with players over the years, isn't it? It's who would you sign for Celtic? It's like kind of not get the knowledge of that anymore because the players Celtic go and sign aren't John Hartson and Chris Sutton.
If you've heard of them, there's 40 million.
Yeah. So those type of guys, but we're kind of in that with managers. But when in previous seasons when Celtic have had managers go, there's been these lots of rumours and how it's going to be Virgo Harkin and Maresca coming in. You can see, that makes sense, bringing in these guys together. But with this, I don't know if people myself included, are just putting 2 and 2 together and saying, "Oh, it's got to be Nonce, or it's got to be KNUTSEN because nothing's happening and now in their seasons come to an end or their Champions League campaigns." And maybe it's not that. Maybe it's just the fact that Celtic don't have a clue who the next manager's going to be.
What do we know? We know that Martin O'Neill said that they're looking to. He's going to be. He thinks he'll be there for 4 weeks. He's also said that they're looking to bring in a young coach with a very strong CV. I suspect that's probably based on conversations you had with Dermot Desmond.
Yeah.
We have heard that Martin O'Neill was at a speaking event and he also suggested that Celtic want to get the new manager in place or will have the new manager in place about December time. So we're looking at young coach, up-and-coming coach with a strong CV coming in December. It's not an awful lot to go on.
No, and usually you get names linked with you and you go, "Oh, do you know what, that makes sense," so I don't see that happening. But right now that you're getting nothing, you were kind of getting Robbie, Keane, Bellamy, former guys linked with it. But to go back to your previous question and what I want, take away the name from it, it kind of is everything KNUTSEN offers with Celtic when it's been a time like this where there is sort of toxicity, there's disaster around.
Two in a row. 2 weeks in a row.
If there is that around the club, you need somebody to come in that's experienced and got a calm head on them. We've seen it with Martin O'Neill, we've seen it with Ange to come in and go, "This is what we need right now, implement this." And
Ange had a calm head.
He did because he came in and he was losing games. He lost his first 3 away games and he said, "Be all right here, we just need to stick at it." Whereas if that's a younger manager coming into that environment, they might not know how to deal with that. So we need somebody to come in. What I mean is somebody who's experienced, who's probably a bit headstrong and say, "No, this is what I do. You've asked me to come in and do this. Give me the tools to do it and I'll do it." And Celtic's best times in my lifetime have been Martin O'Neill and Ange Postecoglou coming in, revolutionising the club, getting the fans on board and going on this ride. I could maybe see that with somebody like KNUTSEN who's coming in and implementing something. But if we just bring in McKenna or Nonce or somebody like that, I would love a young up-and-coming coach. But again, I just don't think the structure's there for them to be successful. And that's the big problem I have here is what I want and what I think's best for Celtic are 2 different things here. And with the names that are branded about, I'm like, I don't really know where we're going here. It doesn't seem like, you know what it's like when, like, for example, Crystal Palace, when they gave Frank de Boer the job, sacked him after like 8 weeks and brought in Roy Hodgson. You're like, but they're 2 completely different managers. I don't see a sort of thread of managers going, "Do you know what? I can see why Celtic are going for him. I can see why they're going for him." I really don't know if they know what they want.
That's a good point, actually. There's maybe a lack of coherence to the approach because, well, we're only going off what's kind of scant information we've got. And I suppose it's also adding to that weird vacuum we find ourselves in with the complete lack of, 1, momentum, as you mentioned, and 2, really any kind of solid rumours or even talk of talks being ongoing. What's adding to the kind of, well, probably for me anyway, general unease of it is that this is actually quite an unusual situation to have an interim manager in who, on the surface of things, at least publicly, has no interest in taking it. That's quite unusual in itself.
It's unusual for us as well. In my lifetime, Celtic have never appointed a permanent manager mid-season.
No, that's very true. So again, that's very unusual in that the January window, all going well, and they appoint someone, will be their first window, the one that Celtic generally fail at. But it's quite strange for a manager, for an interim manager, to have no interest publicly, at least, in taking the job, because I can't really think of many situations where that's happened. Even, I mean, again, terrible comparison, right? But I remember laughing at the time because when Barry Ferguson was there, interim manager, he was clear as day. He was just like, "No, I want it. Like, I think I can take this club forward."
Ganting for it.
It was the David Brent. "I promise I'll try harder next season. Just don't fire
Do you
me."
know what? I'm quite glad that Russell Martin made an absolute horlicks of it at Rangers, because I do get the feeling that had he not been to Ibrox and made an arse of it, we would probably be looking at him someday of that sort.
You're absolutely right. I think I think that's definitely the case, because he was, you know,
bring him in anyway. We'd make a success out of him.
It seems mad now, but at one point he was
hot shit.
Exactly this up and coming coach. So we can probably thank our lucky stars that Rangers tried that one out first.
Do you think a young coach works at Celtic? Because it's never really worked before, and not that we've given a lot of opportunity to it. But
what age was Brendan when he got the Celtic job first time around?
we'd been to Liverpool, hadn't he? He'd been at
Yeah.
Swansea, so he was what, late 40s.
Well,
No, early. Must
I
have
think
been.
he was early 40s. I think the thing about Celtic, and you know, if the mask was closer, I would put it on. the managerial appointments from the board, they always seem to aim quite high, don't
Yeah.
they? I mean, we tried to get Eddie Howe, we didn't get him, but we got Ange in the end. Brendan Rodgers, I mean, okay, Neil Lennon, there's a bit of a blip there.
Isn't this the problem? But
What?
because you take the manager out and it falls apart.
Well, that's
Aye.
it. That's
So
it. And that's
what we want is the stuff behind it, so we can bring somebody in to back that up. So we don't need to go out and get the big manager, because as we're seeing right now, they're not available, or there's not Celtic that's somebody that's got that Celtic connection. We've ran out of that, and this is what we've spoken about over the years. What happens when you run out of Neil Lennon, Martin O'Neill, Brendan Rodgers, guys who've got a connection with Celtic? Are we now looking at going, get Ange back?
no.
They would do
I
it in
don't.
a
I
second.
don't. I honestly don't think so. I think they'll probably take. I honestly think that the board. I feel like we're bringing this to a natural conclusion, but I do feel like the board often view the manager as a problem solver. And
Yeah.
as a result of that, they often over-egg what they're prepared to do. You know, Celtic don't need to go and get Eddie Howe, for example, or Brendan Rodgers as the next manager. It just so happens to suit the way Celtic do business. Look, the last time we did a flagship, we were discussing managerial stuff so heavily that we finished up and Celtic had sacked Brendan Rodgers, and it made the whole podcast absolutely useless. So I'm just warning you guys that, you know, keep your eye on your phones, because if something happens in the next 24 hours,
Roy Hodgson after Melanie mentioned it.
I know this podcast itself is going to be absolutely redundant. Half of you guys that watch us on YouTube, if you've made it this far, don't watch as subscribers, so please hit subscribe, and also support us on patreon.com/20minutetims. See you next week.